enquiry of Daphne Caruana Galizia, and I wonder if we could update our audience.
Yes, as most of the audience will know, next month marks the third anniversary from when Daphne Caruana Galizia was assassinated. It's 3 years since that terrible day, I would say one of the worst days that mark our not only political history, but our national history. A day which we will all remember for the simple reason that one of us was assassinated and was left to be assassinated because of the failures of the state. This was a clear reflection of organized crime, but at the same time, a complete failure of the state institutions to protect a person, to protect a journalist that we all knew, everyone knew that was carrying out journalistic work, investigative journalism that was not in the interest of a political party, was not in her own private commercial interest, but it was in the interest of the public. And in fact, as we all know, the public inquiry got underway only pursuant to the insistence of the family of Daphne Caruana Galizia, of her husband, of her 3 sons, of her parents, and of the Nationalist Party and of the civil society. And here, may I point out and may I thank publicly the sterling efforts that our 2 colleague MPs, Jason Azzopardi and Therese Comodini-Cachia, are doing in the public inquiry, as most probably very few people would even contemplate or think that the effort that is required, the preparation that is required in order to ensure that the truth prevails and that the truth is exposed to the public in this public inquiry is no mean feat. Let's keep in mind that this public inquiry commenced after nearly a year and a half from the assassination of a government that has constantly dragged its feet to appoint the inquiry. And when it decided to appoint it, it continued to split hairs in terms of the terms of reference and the remit of the inquiry. And this week, when you've seen them all, you actually realize that there is more yet to see. This week, the government decided to abruptly give a term for the inquiry to conclude its work. Now, as we all witness when we read the blogs, when we read the work that the journalists are doing to report the evidence that is being given in the public inquiry, we all realize how complex all this is, and each single witness that actually gives evidence unravels yet another part of the plot.
Sure.
Again, when you think you've heard it all, you realize that there is so much more beneath the surface. You actually start thinking that you're just scratching the very, very top of all this complex plot.
Absolutely.
You get ministers, over the last weeks, you get ministers saying that they had nothing to do with major projects. We had the incredulous evidence of the Minister of Finance saying that he wasn't part of what he called the kitchen cabinet, but then at the end of the year, he actually allocates funds to all the projects that his kitchen cabinet, which he says he was unaware of in the first place, was allocating and was carrying out in the country. And you get senior civil servants to say that they were advising government not to pursue any particular route. Case in point this week on the infamous bank guarantee, 360 million bank guarantee that the government made in favor of the power station project. And all of this clearly points out that the public inquiry should not have a fixed term, particularly mandated by the political party in government, and the judiciary, which is responsible for the manning of the inquiry, should be given all the latitude, should be given all the space to ensure that all the evidence that it needs to hear is heard and that it can come to its full, deliberate, and complete conclusion with no political interference in order for this country to reach closure. Now, this country, 3 years have passed since this assassination, and we're nowhere close to reach closure of this, I would say, the saddest chapter of our political history.
Closure for the country and for Daphne's own family, because they're going through a very hard time. Earlier today, just before we came on air, I caught up with MEP Roberta Metsola, Dr. Roberta Metsola, and let's see what she has to say.
Good evening, Leah, and good evening to all viewers of Net Television. The last few months have been anything but normal, both in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic and, of course, the near constant stream of revelations exposing the extent of the corruption, the incompetence and the complicity of the Labour government and its hold on our institutions. This is a fight that has been going on for years. We knew, as did everyone, that when Conrad Mizzi and Keith Kembrew were exposed by Daphne Caruana Galizia as having secret shell companies in dodgy jurisdictions across the world, that they were up to no good. We knew before then, but that confirmed it. Conrad Mizzi's accountants tried to open up bank accounts promising deposits of cash that he did not have and could not possibly legally earn while minister. The obvious thing to do at the time was to relieve them of any political influence and ensure law enforcement has all the resources necessary to investigate and bring them to justice. Instead, shockingly, but perhaps predictably, Joseph Muscat defended them time and time and time again. They called us traitors. They went after everyone who dared speak out, but they failed to silence us. Then Daphne Caruana Galizia was assassinated, and we've all heard the testimony about what happened, who paid for it, who ordered it, who approved it, and who ultimately tried to cover it up and destroy her legacy. Again, they failed. We've now seen minister after minister testify that they had no idea what was going on, that they were not involved, and that they were incapable of standing up, and that they were too weak and too scared to speak up. Everyone, I'm sure, will make up their own minds about this. But I want to get back to the issue of law enforcement and police. The former police commissioner has come in for a justifiable amount of criticism. To say his legacy is tainted is the mildest thing one can say, and how he ended up should be a warning to everyone else. Now, I have a huge amount of respect for the police force and law enforcement, the officers who put their lives on the line every day to keep order. They deserve and have our respect, and I am glad that after years of lions being led by lambs, we now have a concerted effort for the corps to regain the respect it deserves. Having a respected police force and prosecution service is essential, because justice must be done, it must be seen to be done, and people must have their expectations of blind justice met. After all, these are the basic requisites for a normal functioning country. So when I see decisions like that of Prime Minister Abela to limit the time frame and try to rush through the Daphne Caruana Galizia public inquiry, I worry. The new Prime Minister should be the one most eager to get to the bottom of all of this and expose the truth. We all deserve to know the truth, and arbitrarily trying to end the public inquiry that has shed so much light on disgraceful events leading up to the assassination of a journalist is simply not the right way forward.
Thank you. That was Dr. Roberta Metsola, MEP. More or less, really reinforcing what you've been saying. She did mention the former police commissioner, Lawrence Cutajar, and I'd like to refer to an article that appeared in the Times of Malta this week on Thursday by MEP David Kaza. Can you shed some more light for people perhaps who haven't seen it?
No, ultimately, as Roberta has eloquently explained, the crux of the matter is that in a state, in a normal state, the police force is there to defend its citizens. Simple. The reality is that from what we've heard up to now, in both the public inquiry but also in the actual compilation of evidence in the criminal cases that are underway, we have actually realized that there was this massive failure by the police force and other institutions to deliver this kind of protection to those that need most of the protection. Now, this creates yet another layer of problems in our institutions, because we have to keep in mind that it is extremely unfair to label all the police force, to label all the officers in our security organizations, to label all the officers in our financial intelligence analysis unit as being officers who are not fulfilling their duties. Because we all know individuals, we all know that most of these people, not to say practically all of them, are doing their duty, and most of them do their best to go beyond their call of duty. And this is why, at least now, we look at the way forward in this very dark chapter with a bit of more optimism. We're seeing that the police force is taking certain actions. The police force is now at least acknowledging the massive gaps that there were in this institution, and that's a very good first step, to at least acknowledge the massive problems that exist today, which, mind you, when we were, as Roberta explained, when we were saying all along that there are these massive gaps in the governance of the police force, we used to be called negative. We used to be called, we want to personalize issues, you know. Let's look at where we ended up now. So we look forward with, let's put it this way, cautious optimism that we shall arrive to a situation where whoever was involved in this heinous crime, either as a perpetrator or as someone who had the duty to ensure that something so disastrous for the country, but so even more disastrous for the family, is actually brought to justice.
Brought to justice. And I'd like to share with our audience, perhaps for those of you who weren't with us, a few weeks ago, my guest here was Dr. Jason Azzopardi, and here's what he had to say. To be honest,
I will not mince my words. This is the case of the century. It is overwhelming. The evil, the organized, coordinated evil that permeates all the levels of this case is mind-boggling. But I'll be very blunt. Our determination, when I say our, the family and the legal team, to get to the bottom, in spite of everyone and everything, the resolve is much, much stronger than it was a week ago, than it was a year ago, than it was 2 years ago. And we will leave no stone unturned. We will leave no stone unturned. Not Joseph Muscat, who in 2017 said he will leave no stone unturned, and now we know, the public knows, because we have known what is coming out from the testimony in court. We have been carrying inside. There's much more. And when it comes out, you will realize that we were right, that Daphne was right, that the family was right, that civil society is right, that the opposition is right when it says this government is corrupt to the core.
Basically, without going into the numbers, because numbers are always boring and I always get them wrong anyway, Electrogas seems to have been owned by 3 of the major entrepreneurial families in Malta. The Gazans, the Trapanigalias, they're also a noble family. They're the people who would describe as old money, I suppose. And the Fennecs, who seem to have had two hands in the pot here. Jürgen Fenech directly through his own personal involvement, and the Fenech group itself.
So a very complex case, Dr. Grech, as you were saying.
Yes, as Jason was explaining, the complexity in terms of the work that the legal team is carrying out together with the family cannot be underestimated. And one needs to keep in mind the extremely limited resources that the team has at its disposal, the uphill struggle it continuously has with legal hurdles that are constantly put in front of the legal team, but even more so, the actual complexity of the multiple cases, the multiple hearings that are going on practically simultaneously, in which the team needs to ensure, because the team is appearing parte civile for the Caruana Galizia family, to ensure that justice is effectively served. However, I would like to link to a key point which Jason was referring to in his explanation, that in effect, the whole picture does not only shed, as we're actually seeing from and hearing from the evidence, does not only shed the more light on the actual assassination plot of Daphne Caruana Galizia, but it actually goes even further down on the motives that link to this plot, on the various projects that were underway in the country. And again, I remind you that at the time, in the last legislature, when we used to stress that these projects were mired in corruption, at the time we didn't know what was underway, what was going on behind the scenes, but we used to stress about the point that these projects were not making economic sense for the country. Now we know why they were being actually pursued.
It's like a jigsaw puzzle, and everything's...
They make our arguments are so much vindicated that the Minister of Finance himself openly and under oath dissociates himself from these projects.
Yeah.
Now imagine a modern EU member state, contracting its major electricity and gas provider in a country and contracting the privatization of 3 public hospitals. And the Minister of Finance goes in court in the public inquiry in connection with the assassination of Daphne Caruana Galizia and openly states that he has nothing to do with these projects. Now, but in which country, in which modern country could something like this effectively take place? And the Minister of Finance goes on with his job like, it's just business as usual. And believe me, Leah, this is not business as usual. And despite that we live, maybe everyone has his own distractions in life, has his own personal life, has his own business, has his own job, has his own family issues. This is not business as usual. This is not life as it should be in a normal country. What can we explain to our children? What can we tell our children?
Yes.
When my children ask me, I clearly recall on the day when Daphne Caruana Galizia was assassinated, what happened? Why? When your children ask you why, how can you look in the eyes of your children and tell them that she was assassinated because of the common good?
Especially in a country which is an EU member state.
Absolutely, and this is, and I fully subscribe to Jason's resolve. As I stated in the beginning, they are doing, both him, Therese, and the family are doing an incredible job, a very thankless job, because unfortunately, in many instances, rather than the public appreciating what these people are going through to make sure that the truth prevails, they actually encounter very, very unjust treatment, but I'm sure that they are capable of taking it in their stride. But I'm confident that we, as an opposition party, will keep on supporting them, will keep on supporting the family until justice is actually served, and that the truth, the full truth about the assassination, but even more so, the full truth about the motivations of what led to this assassination are duly uncovered and made public.
Thank you very much, Dr. Grech. Thank you very much. We're just switching